Roman Reigns might retire from professional wrestling, because what Bron Breakker and Seth Rollins did wasn't a match. It was a two-man execution. A coordinated, cold-blooded assault that left the so-called tribal chief face down, motionless, and humiliated. And just when you thought it couldn't get worse, Paul Heyman stood over his broken body and laughed. This wasn't just an attack. This was a dethroning. And if you think Reigns is walking away from this untouched, you haven't seen what they did to him yet. Let's break it all down, blow by brutal blow. What if I told you the tribal chief didn't lose a match, but a war? Not with a pin. Not with a tap out. With boots. Chairs. Steel. With a silence so loud, it left 18,000 fans gasping in unison. And laughter, Paul Heyman's laughter, echoing over Roman Reigns' broken body. What happened on Raw wasn't a wrestling match. It was a ritual. A dethroning. A message carved into flesh and announced in violence. Roman Reigns, arguably the most dominant force in WWE in the past decade, was humiliated, beaten, and left face down, motionless, in front of the entire world. The culprits? Not some upstart tag team. Not an invading faction. No. It was Bron Breakker, the genetically gifted juggernaut with legacy in his blood. And Seth freakin' Rollins, the architect, the joker, the wild card who knows Roman better than anyone. Together, they didn't just attack Reigns. They erased him. Now here's the question. Was this a simple wrestling storyline? Or was this the beginning of the end, for Roman Reigns, for the bloodline, and maybe even for the WWE as we know it? Keep watching. Because we're breaking it all down, blow by brutal blow. Let's rewind, not just to the moment the beatdown began, but to the moment Roman Reigns walked out. He didn't look worried. He didn't look threatened. He looked like a man who'd been untouchable for years, and who believed that status couldn't change. Roman came to Raw expecting to assert dominance, cut a promo, maybe plant seeds for a SummerSlam headline. He wore the gold. The red lay. The smirk. The arena? It was electric. Half cheers, half boos, exactly the way Roman likes it. The man had become a walking contradiction. A hero to some. A tyrant to others. But everyone agreed, he was untouchable. Until he wasn't. Bron Breakker hit like a sniper. No music. No warning. No drama. Just impact. Out of nowhere, the camera cut, and Roman was already down. Clothesline. German suplex. Spear through the barricade. That was just the warm-up. Roman never even got his jacket off. People in the crowd stood up, thinking this was an angle. That this would end in a few minutes with Roman standing tall again. But then Seth Rollins came through the crowd, and everything changed. Because Seth wasn't there to make a save. He was there to finish the job. He smiled. That sick, wide-eyed grin we've seen before, during cash-ins, betrayals, mind games. And without a word, he joined in. Chair to the back. Curb stomp to the steel steps. Screams from the commentary team. Paul Heyman didn't try to stop it. He didn't plead. He didn't cry. He stood there, shock still, watching. And when it was over, when Roman's body stopped twitching, Heyman stepped forward, bent over Roman's body. And laughed. No words. No monologue. Just laughter. If you're a casual viewer, you might think this is just another shock moment. WWE's done those before. Chairs, betrayals, dramatic turns, they're part of the formula. But this wasn't just an attack. This was surgical. This was psychological. This was historic. Why? Because for nearly 4 years, Roman Reigns has stood as the spine of WWE storytelling. He wasn't just champion, he was the center of gravity. Every storyline, every faction, every pay-per-view built around his reign. He redefined what it meant to be a heel. He made the bloodline must-see TV. He didn't just hold the belts, he held the narrative. Until now. Now that spine is cracked. Now the centerpiece is gone. And the ones who took him out? A silent killer with a Hall of Fame family name, and a manic mastermind with a grudge older than some fans watching. This wasn't an isolated moment. This was a transfer of power. A coup. A message to the locker room, to the fans, to the industry. The questions are already piling up. Is Roman Reigns injured for real, or is this an elaborate build to something bigger? Why did Paul Heyman let it happen, and worse, why did he seem to enjoy it? Is this Bron Breakker's true arrival, or is he just a pawn in something bigger? And what the hell does Seth Rollins want? Revenge? Power? Or to watch it all burn? WWE hasn't given answers yet. But we're about to explore every inch of this story, from the betrayal to the fallout. You're not watching a recap. You're watching a postmortem. An autopsy of an empire. So if you think Roman Reigns is walking away untouched, you haven't seen what they did to him yet. Before there was betrayal, before there was blood on the floor of Monday Night Raw, there was a man who ruled WWE with iron fists wrapped in gold. Roman Reigns didn't just climb the mountain of WWE superstardom. He bulldozed it, rebuilt it in his image, and dared anyone to challenge him at the summit. His story isn't one of lucky breaks or underdog victories. It's the story of a transformation, a reclamation, and a domination unlike anything wrestling has seen in the modern era. Roman Reigns was never meant to be this. He was supposed to be a smiling, clean-cut company guy. The chosen one. The guy WWE forced fans to love. And for years, they pushed. The Superman punch. The flak vest. The recycled Shield music. The merchandise. The multiple WrestleMania main events. The feuds that fans rejected and the scripts that tried to convince the audience he was their hero. It didn't work. He was booed in babyface glory. Cheered reluctantly. And always polarizing. But Roman Reigns did something few in wrestling ever managed to do. He took the rejection, the criticism, the fatigue, and turned it into fuel. When he returned in 2020 after stepping away during the pandemic, he came back different. Not just physically. Spiritually. He shed the big dog skin and stepped into something more terrifying. Something more real. The tribal chief was born. This wasn't just a heel turn. It was a resurrection. He aligned with Paul Heyman, the same man who once stood behind Brock Lesnar and pushed him to destroy legacies. Heyman lent Reigns something he never had before, gravitas. Silence became his weapon. Glares replaced catchphrases. And when he spoke, he didn't yell. He instructed. He judged. He proclaimed. He demanded acknowledgement. The bloodline became more than a faction. It became a kingdom. Jey Uso, at first hesitant, became his right-hand man, only after being broken, humiliated, and rebuilt in Roman's image. Jimmy Uso followed. Then Solo Sikoa. Each member served a role not just in matches but in narrative construction. This was mafia-level storytelling, where family wasn't just a gimmick, it was currency. Loyalty was earned through suffering. Betrayal was punished in public. And Roman sat at the head of it all, manipulating, commanding, and dominating. The numbers told their own story. Over 1,300 days as Universal Champion. A run that outlasted entire eras. WrestleMania wins over legends and main event level talents. He beat Edge, Bryan, Cena, Lesnar, Owens, McIntyre, and everyone in between. And he did it with the calculated precision of a boss, not a brawler. He rarely looked vulnerable. He didn't need to. But the victories weren't what made Roman's reign legendary. It was how he made everything feel consequential. A promo from Roman wasn't just hype, it was a warning. A tag match on SmackDown wasn't filler, it was a chess move. His presence elevated everyone around him because proximity to Roman meant relevance. That's power. When Roman spoke, the locker room listened. When he walked into a ring, time slowed. WWE revolved around him, its title picture, its creative direction, even its schedule. Roman became a part-time star who never felt absent. His mystique was built on scarcity and control. He wasn't just a performer, he was an institution. And fans started to get it. They didn't have to love him. But they respected him. Some even began to root for him, not in spite of his tyranny, but because of it. Roman represented something we rarely see in wrestling anymore, a long-term vision executed to near perfection. The tribal chief moniker wasn't just branding. It was a philosophical shift. Roman saw himself not as champion, but as ruler. He expected tribute. He demanded fealty. He rewrote what it meant to be a villain in modern WWE. He wasn't cartoonish. He wasn't cheap heat. He was layered, cold, methodical. And in moments of weakness, he didn't crumble, he reasserted his dominance by emotionally brutalizing his own blood. The family dynamics were Shakespearean. Jey Uso's inner conflict. Jimmy's sudden disobedience. Solo's quiet loyalty. Paul Heyman's sycophantic devotion. Roman wasn't just winning matches, he was orchestrating a drama that played out like prestige television, over months and years. By 2023, Roman Reigns wasn't just the top guy. He was the story. His entrance music became a moment of its own. The crowd went silent. The lights dimmed. The titles, plural, shined. The lei was draped over his neck, symbolizing Samoan heritage and unchallenged leadership. Everything about Roman screamed control. His timing. His pacing. Even his defeats, rare as they were, felt more like political setbacks than true losses. He didn't need to wrestle every week. He didn't need to prove anything in 20-minute matches. He proved it with silence, with positioning, with presence. He was playing chess while the rest played checkers. That's what makes what happened on Raw so jarring. So violent. So final. Because Roman Reigns was a man who built an empire where no one could touch him without consequences. His empire was built on ritual and fear. On loyalty forged in fire. For Bron Breakker and Seth Rollins to destroy that in minutes, it wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. That moment shattered not just Roman's body, but the image he had carefully constructed. The invincible aura. The tribal warlord. The mastermind of manipulation. All of it was brought crashing down, not in a grand pay-per-view event, but in the middle of Raw. No pomp. No build-up. No stakes. Just a blindside and a burial. It's important to remember what was lost in that moment. Roman Reigns wasn't just the longest reigning champion in recent history, he was a measuring stick. Every feud, every moment in WWE over the past 3 years was measured against his standard. When you fought Roman, you weren't just in a main event. You were in a trial. Your value was determined by how much punishment you could endure from him, how much respect he gave you in promos, and whether you left with more than you came in with. He elevated Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Cody Rhodes, and even Logan Paul. Not just because he let them get a fence, but because he let them challenge him emotionally. And in return, fans began to believe in those opponents again. Roman was a crucible. A filter. You went in uncertain and came out changed, win or lose. So when Bron and Seth took him out, they didn't just defeat a champion. They broke the prism WWE had been using to tell its stories. And they did it together. Two men with very different pasts, but one shared goal: eliminate the god, and inherit the kingdom. But what made Roman's reign so profound wasn't just his domination. It was the creeping realization that maybe, just maybe, he deserved it. That the wrestling world needed someone like him. Someone to anchor the chaos. Someone to keep the roster orbiting around a fixed point. Now, without him, what happens? The landscape is wide open. The balance is disrupted. And the man who once demanded acknowledgement now lies silent. If this is the end of Roman Reigns' era, it ends not with a final battle or emotional goodbye. It ends with a steel chair, a stomp, and laughter from the man who once called him the tribal chief. There's no Hall of Fame speech. No torch passed. Just a fallen king, face down in the dirt he ruled for years. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most fitting end of all. For a man who built his kingdom on power and fear, it makes sense that he'd lose it not in a match, but in a moment. A single moment that undid everything. That is the myth. That is the empire. That was the tribal chief. And now, that era is over. When the dust settled and Roman Reigns lay in a heap at the center of the Raw ring, all eyes turned toward the two men who left him there. One of them was Seth Rollins, an icon, a veteran, a chaos agent we've come to expect this kind of savagery from. But the other? That was the moment the world turned its gaze to Bron Breakker. And some people asked, who is this guy? Those who knew. They didn't ask. They just nodded, almost grimly. Because those people knew exactly what Bron Breakker was capable of, and they knew it was only a matter of time before he unleashed it on the main stage. Bron Breakker didn't rise through the ranks by talking. He didn't need viral promos or flashy gimmicks. He didn't dance. He didn't smile. He hit. And when he hit, it was with a kind of force you could feel through the television. The kind that makes other superstars check their contracts twice. But let's rewind the tape. Who is Bron Breakker, really? Bron is the son of Rick Steiner and the nephew of Scott Steiner, two men whose legacies in the wrestling world are written in blood, sweat, and a unique brand of intensity that bordered on insanity. The Steiner brothers were freak athletes. Mat machines. Explosive, real, dangerous. Bron inherited every bit of that, and maybe more. From the second he debuted in NXT, he looked like a hybrid of both men, the brute power of Rick, the wild eyes and intensity of Scott. And the way he moved, fast, brutal, efficient, made it clear he wasn't just riding coattails. Bron was building his own legend. In NXT, he tore through opponents like they were paper. Big men, technical wrestlers, high flyers, it didn't matter. His spear was among the most devastating in WWE. It wasn't just a move. It was a weapon. He held the NXT championship twice. He carried that brand on his back. But he never looked comfortable there. And not because he was bad at it. Because he was too good. Bron Breakker didn't belong in developmental. He was built for war zones, not classrooms. He was a tank trying to learn how to tiptoe. So WWE did the smart thing. They kept him quiet. Off radar. Occasionally teased his presence. Slowly tested him in dark matches and backstage segments. Let the rumors simmer. The company knew what it had in Bron, not just a prospect, but a predator. And you don't waste a predator on random tag matches. You unleash him when the time is right. When the kingdom is ready to be taken. And what better moment than now, when the tribal chief was vulnerable? Here's the genius behind the move. Bron Breakker didn't make his splash with a surprise debut or a major pay-per-view moment. He didn't enter a Royal Rumble or cut a pipe bomb promo. He did something far more dangerous. He attacked the apex predator at the top of the food chain, and he did it like it was nothing. No theatrics. No hesitation. No words. Just raw, precise violence. That's why it worked. That's why the crowd was stunned. Because this wasn't the call-up of a new superstar. It was the arrival of a threat. WWE has seen call-ups come and go. We've seen NXT stars fizzle under the lights of the main stage. But Bron didn't fizzle. He ignited. And he chose the perfect target. Not a mid-carder. Not a struggling babyface. He went after Roman Reigns, the most protected character in WWE storytelling. He sent a message in the simplest, most primal way wrestling can deliver: dominance. But let's not pretend this was just a beatdown. It was an execution, and that required planning. And that's where the questions start: how long had Bron been waiting? Who helped him plan this? Was Seth Rollins the mastermind, or just the opportunist who saw a rising star and decided to hitch his wagon to the destruction? Or worse, was Bron the one who approached Seth? That's the truly unsettling possibility. Because if Bron Breakker, the silent powerhouse, is now calculating too, if he's not just a muscle-bound brawler but a strategist, then WWE is dealing with something far more dangerous than they anticipated. It means he didn't just attack Roman to make a name for himself. He attacked him to take something. Not a title. Not airtime. Power. Think about it. What happens when the man who ruled with fear is taken out by someone even more terrifying, someone who doesn't even care about the politics or the spectacle? Bron didn't say a word. He didn't stand over Roman and yell about destiny. He didn't ask the crowd to acknowledge him. He just left the ring like he was walking away from a job well done. That's what makes it so chilling. He didn't act like a rookie chasing fame. He acted like a soldier completing an assignment. And if this wasn't his idea, if someone else gave the order, then who the hell is pulling Bron Breakker's strings? We also can't ignore the visual messaging. When Bron speared Roman through the barricade, it wasn't just a spot, it was symbolic. Roman has done that same move to dozens of opponents. It's part of his highlight reel. Seeing someone else do it to him felt wrong. It felt sacrilegious. Bron didn't just attack Roman physically. He dismantled Roman's identity piece by piece. The barricade spot. The Superman punch countered. The stare into the hard cam. The slow, deliberate movements. It was calculated mimicry. Like he was saying, I've studied you. And now I've replaced you. Which brings us to the deeper question, is Bron Breakker the next Roman Reigns? That's the narrative WWE is inviting now. But here's the thing, Bron doesn't need to be the next anything. He's not Roman. He's not Cena. He's not Lesnar. He's not even a new Batista or Goldberg. He's something else entirely, an anomaly in the system. A man with the lineage of legends but the demeanor of a mercenary. He doesn't seem interested in fame or showmanship. He's here for something colder, more exact. If Bron Breakker represents the future of WWE, it's a future built on silence, strength, and shocking violence. Not mic skills or merchandise. And that future is scary. Because for years, WWE has built stars with voices. With stories. With redemption arcs and crowd pops and catchphrases. Bron is an answer to all that, a rejection of the formula. He's the blunt force trauma that follows after diplomacy fails. That's why Roman Reigns couldn't see him coming. Roman was playing chess. Bron was playing demolition. And now, the locker room knows. They saw what he did to the top guy. They heard the silence after the carnage. And now they're asking themselves a terrifying question: if Bron could do that to Roman, what chance does anyone else have? WWE has unleashed a monster that doesn't want your approval. He wants your place. And if what we saw on Raw was only the beginning, then the Breakker era may not be something you watch unfold. It might be something you survive. If Bron Breakker was the muscle, the bullet fired into Roman Reigns' empire, then Seth Rollins was the man who pulled the trigger with a smile on his face. Where Bron brought raw power, Rollins brought the chaos. And together, they didn't just attack Roman, they dismantled him like a sadistic art piece. But to understand why Seth freakin' Rollins did what he did, you have to go way back. Because this moment wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic. This was personal. Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns have history. Deep, complicated, blood-soaked history. Long before Roman reigned as the tribal chief, long before Seth was the architect or the visionary, they were brothers. Shield brothers. A trio with Dean Ambrose who tore through WWE like a storm. They debuted together, dominated together, and for a while, they were inseparable. Until Seth did what Seth always does, he burned it down. In 2014, Seth Rollins shocked the world by slamming a chair into Roman Reigns' back and aligning himself with the authority. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the first time Roman learned what ambition without loyalty looks like. And it came from someone he trusted. That moment shaped both men. Roman hardened. Seth fragmented. And their paths would intertwine and diverge for years afterward. They fought. They teamed. They insulted. They reconciled, only to fight again. But no matter how many years passed, no matter how different their characters became, the shadow of that chair shot never faded. Roman never truly forgave Seth. And Seth never truly let go of the idea that he was smarter, more adaptable, and more deserving of the spotlight than Roman. So when Roman rose to the top and stayed there, when he held both world titles hostage for years, it ate at Seth. Not just because Roman was the champion, but because Roman had become untouchable. While Seth clawed for scraps. While Seth stole shows but got second billing. While Seth gave everything, Roman took everything. And that's what makes this betrayal so perfect. So venomous. Seth wasn't just attacking a rival, he was taking back what he thought he created. Because without Seth, there is no Roman Reigns. He built him. He broke him. He watched him rise. And now, he's the one who finally brought him down. Let's talk about the timing. Why now? Seth Rollins has always been a character fueled by reinvention. He was the architect. The Kingslayer. The Messiah. The visionary. The Joker-esque wildcard with suits louder than pyro and a laugh that makes your skin crawl. But underneath every reinvention is the same core need: control. Seth needs to be in charge of the chaos. He thrives in disorder, as long as he's the one directing it. That's why watching Roman operate as an unquestioned, unchallenged, stoic God King must have been unbearable. Roman didn't just survive WWE's chaos. He stopped it. He tamed it. And in doing so, he took away Seth's playground. So Seth built a new plan. And that plan involved something rare: patience. For once, Rollins didn't strike first. He waited. Watched. Let Roman's empire grow bloated and arrogant. Let Roman believe his position was unshakable. And then, when Bron Breakker struck the first blow, Seth emerged from the shadows with perfect timing. He didn't show up to save Roman. He didn't even speak. He walked in, smiling that unhinged smile, and turned the beating into a message. And that's the most terrifying part. Seth Rollins wasn't there for revenge. He was there for pleasure. Because to him, this wasn't betrayal. It was justice. This was the correction of a wrong. This was years of being overlooked, of being passed over, of being the better wrestler and worse draw, all boiled down to one moment. One stomp. One final laugh over the body of his brother. And let's not forget what Seth's done in the past. This isn't new for him. Rollins has always been the guy who sees the bigger picture, and chooses chaos anyway. He's betrayed allies. He's manipulated factions. He's destroyed friendships and careers not out of desperation, but out of strategy. Seth is a snake with a PhD in mind games. And he used Roman's own arrogance against him. Because Seth knew Roman wouldn't see it coming. Not from him. Not again. Let's talk about how Seth positioned himself before this attack. In recent months, he kept his distance from Roman. He focused on the World Heavyweight Championship. He did media. He played the crowd. He dressed like a Bond villain having a nervous breakdown. All of it was part of the smokescreen. He let the world forget their history so he could rewrite it. And then, in front of a live audience on Raw, he wrote the final chapter. Chair to the back. Curb stomp on the steel steps. No words. No gloating. Just the image, Seth, standing tall, laughing like a man who finally broke the unbreakable. And that image will haunt WWE forever. But now comes the most important question, what does Seth want now? Because if this was just about revenge, it's over. The job's done. Roman's broken. But knowing Seth, this is only the beginning. Seth Rollins doesn't move without a long game. And that long game might be darker than anyone expects. Does he want the titles? Possibly. Does he want to control the narrative? Definitely. But more than anything, Seth Rollins wants validation. He wants the world to say what he's always believed, that he's smarter, more talented, more essential than Roman Reigns ever was. This wasn't just a physical statement. It was a legacy war. Rollins doesn't want Roman gone. He wants Roman forgotten. And if he has to destroy what Roman built, brick by brick, memory by memory, he'll do it. He's already started. The bloodline is fractured. The aura is gone. The invincibility shattered. And now, Seth can step into the chaos as the only one who knows how to control it. Because that's what he's always been. The man with the matches. The man who smiles while the fire spreads. The man who doesn't need to be your hero, or your villain. He just needs to be the one holding the torch when the empire burns. It was supposed to be another Monday Night Raw. Another night of storylines, showdowns, and suspense. A night like any other in the rhythm of WWE programming. Fans filled the arena expecting big names, maybe a twist or two. Roman Reigns was advertised to appear. That alone was enough to sell tickets. The tribal chief doesn't show up often, but when he does, the air changes. There's electricity. Wait. It feels like something is about to happen, even when it's not supposed to. But on this night, something did happen. And it wasn't a segment. It wasn't a promo. It wasn't a setup for a pay-per-view. It was a massacre. The show began like any other. The commentary team hyped the card. Packages ran on recent feuds. And then, the lights dimmed. Roman's theme hit, slow, operatic, loaded with self-importance. The arena erupted. Some cheered. Many booed. That reaction had become the soundtrack of his reign. Polarized adoration. Respect wrapped in resentment. He walked out, gold draped over his shoulder, red lay around his neck, Paul Heyman at his side. The usual slow strut. Chin up. Smirk locked in place. His aura hadn't faded one bit. Not yet. What happened next didn't come with warning. There was no interruption music. No countdown clock. No surprise Titantron video. Just sudden, sharp movement at the edge of the screen. Bron Breakker hit him like a missile. The camera barely caught it. 1 second Roman was walking. The next, he was airborne, flung like a ragdoll by a spear that looked like it had been fired out of a cannon. Roman slammed into the barricade, crashing through it with a sickening thud. Fans near the front row stumbled back in shock. No one knew if it was real. That's how sudden it was. That's how violent it looked. Breakker didn't posture. He didn't soak in the reaction. He didn't yell. He just advanced. Reigns tried to stand, barely. Bron grabbed him and threw him into the steel steps, shoulder first. Roman grunted, clutching his arm, rolling away like a man who hadn't been hit that hard in years. This wasn't selling. This was survival. For a moment, you could see it in his eyes, confusion. Disbelief. Breakker didn't care. He dragged Roman up by the neck and shoved him into the post, full force. The sound of skull against steel was sharp and cold. Roman dropped. The commentary team screamed over each other. Where's security? Where's Solo? Where's Heyman? Heyman stood frozen, just out of frame. Wide-eyed. Silent. Watching. Bron dragged Roman's body toward the ring and threw him inside. And that's when the crowd began to sense something was wrong, not just with Roman, but with the entire night. This wasn't a debut. This wasn't a run-in. This was something far darker. Then came Seth. Through the crowd, black hoodie up, grin already curling. The audience buzzed. They thought maybe Rollins was here to save Roman. The old Shield brother. The frenemy. The rival who might still have a code. But the second he slid into the ring and squared up behind Breakker, you could feel the mood shift. Roman, still crawling, looked up and saw him. There was a flicker of recognition. Of betrayal. And then it happened. Chair shot to the spine. It echoed. Roman collapsed again. The crowd erupted, but not in cheers. Not in the normal, "this is awesome," kind of pop. It was confusion. Tension. Audible discomfort. Rollins kept swinging. Again. And again. And again. Each shot more deliberate. More sadistic. Breakker stood by, unmoving. Watching. Finally, Seth dropped the chair, grabbed Roman by the hair, and planted him face first into it with a curb stomp. The camera cut to Heyman. His mouth twitched. His fingers were shaking. He stepped forward. Just once. And then, he smiled. A cold, measured, half-smile. And then came the laughter. Paul Heyman, the wise man, the master manipulator who'd once called Roman his tribal chief, stood over his fallen leader and laughed. Not loud. Not manic. Just steady. Quiet. Real. That moment burned itself into the minds of everyone watching. Live crowd. Commentators. Fans at home. It didn't feel scripted. It felt like a betrayal that had been building for months. Security finally ran down, but not fast enough. Rollins and Breakker exited the ring on their own terms. No rush. No panic. No remorse. Roman didn't move. Refs checked on him. Heyman was gone. The commentary team didn't know what to say. For once, the usually bombastic, always in control announcers were stunned. Graves mumbled something about the sanctity of the ring. Cole said Roman might be seriously injured. No one had any answers. Only questions. Fans in the arena stood in silence. Some were visibly shaken. Others booed. A few chanted, but there was no cohesion. Just noise. Just raw, stunned energy. Replays aired. Slow-motion shots of the stomp. The laughter. The collapse. No music. Just silence and reaction shots. Backstage, there was no immediate fallout shown. No interviews. No social posts. Just uncertainty. And that was the brilliance of it. This wasn't a moment designed to trend. It wasn't meant to be hyped up ahead of time. It was a detonation planted inside a routine episode, and it changed everything. The implications were massive. Roman Reigns was not just beaten. He was embarrassed. Left in a heap. Not during a title match. Not at a pay-per-view. But during what should have been a routine segment. That stripped away all the pomp and grandeur of his reign. It reduced him from a mythic champion to a man blindsided and broken in front of the world. And the message was clear. No one is untouchable. No legacy is safe. No empire lasts forever. This is the night the bloodline cracked at the center. The night the tribal chief bled in public. The night the throne was ripped away, not with a pinfall or submission, but with a conspiracy, a betrayal, and a plan that no one saw coming. The Raw that shook the bloodline wasn't just an episode. It was a war crime. And it will be remembered forever. Wrestling, at its core, is about psychology. Not just the psychology of moves, but the psychology of characters, of crowd control, of timing. What makes a moment unforgettable isn't the bump, it's the meaning behind the bump. And what happened to Roman Reigns on Raw wasn't just a surprise. It was premeditated mental warfare disguised as a wrestling ambush. This wasn't chaos. It was strategy. Cold, calculated, and psychological in every frame. Start with the approach. Bron Breakker didn't enter to music. There was no countdown, no lights, no dramatic setup. He didn't want the moment to be about his arrival. He wanted the moment to be about Roman's vulnerability. The first shot, a spear from out of frame, was designed not just to physically rattle Reigns but to mentally dismantle him. For the first time in years, Roman looked caught off guard. He looked shocked. And that's important. Roman Reigns' entire reign as the tribal chief was built on control. He dictated pace. He set traps. He was always a step ahead. To blindside him wasn't just a tactical move, it was a narrative reversal. It stripped away the psychological armor he wore into every arena. It said, "You're not in control anymore." After the initial impact, Bron didn't pose. He didn't yell. He didn't gesture to the crowd. He moved with the mechanical efficiency of someone carrying out orders. That silence spoke volumes. It framed him not as a wild card but as a weapon. And that raises the psychological stakes even higher. Because when a threat doesn't show emotion, it's terrifying. You can't predict it. You can't manipulate it. Roman couldn't even appeal to it, because it wasn't there to be appealed to. Then comes Seth Rollins. Where Bron was silent force, Rollins was calculated madness. He didn't rush the ring. He didn't run in to help. He entered with a purpose. With a plan. He waited until Roman was disoriented, then struck from the blind spot Roman had left open. That moment when Roman looked up and saw him, the realization in his eyes was chilling. You could almost read the thought process: is he here to help? Is this another trap? Is this happening again? And that's where the deep psychological fracture was exposed. Because Roman's whole mythology is built around betrayal and control. He manipulates. He deceives. He fears disloyalty more than defeat. So to have Seth, the man who first betrayed him, walk in at that moment and side with his attacker, that wasn't just a physical hit. It was a mental collapse. Every stomp, every chair shot, was aimed not just at the body, but at the character. They didn't try to pin Roman. They didn't cut a promo. They tried to erase him. And then there was Paul Heyman. Arguably the most psychologically complex character in the entire Roman Reigns story. His reaction told a full story in itself. At first, he was frozen, paralyzed, unreadable. But the moment Roman was laid out cold, Heyman didn't panic. He stepped forward. He smiled. He laughed. That laugh is what completed the psychological execution. It wasn't performative. It wasn't exaggerated. It was small, restrained, and devastating. It wasn't the laugh of a villain twirling his mustache, it was the laugh of a man who had waited for this moment. A man who saw the inevitable play out and simply accepted it. What made it worse was what he didn't do. He didn't plead with Rollins to stop. He didn't call for help. He didn't run to Roman's side. He let it happen. That decision reframed everything we thought we knew about Heyman. And by extension, about Roman's reign. Because if Heyman was in on it, or at the very least okay with it, then maybe Roman's rule wasn't as solid as it seemed. Maybe cracks had been forming backstage, in the silence, in the moments off camera. This wasn't just about pain. This was about dismantling an identity. The tribal chief identity was built on dominance, control, and fear. By attacking Roman in this way, suddenly, ruthlessly, without warning, Breakker and Rollins shattered the illusion of control. They didn't beat Roman in a match where he could argue strategy or bad luck. They beat him in a context where he had no power. That humiliation is harder to recover from than a loss. In wrestling psychology, the nature of the attack matters as much as the result. This wasn't a wrestling beatdown. This was an execution in full view of the crowd, without rules, without purpose, other than sending a message: no one is safe. And that message wasn't just for Roman. It was for the entire roster. This was psychological warfare on a company-wide scale. Because when the man everyone fears gets destroyed like that, it sends shockwaves. Locker room hierarchies get challenged. Storylines collapse. Characters pivot. The alpha was eliminated, and not by someone gunning for a title, but by someone gunning for a legacy. That is where the real psychological bomb went off. Because this wasn't about gold. It was about supremacy. And Roman's wasn't taken from him in a match. It was stolen in silence. If Roman Reigns was the empire, Paul Heyman was the architect behind the throne. The strategist. The voice. The wise man. He was the one who whispered when Roman roared, who made chaos sound like order, who could talk crowds into submission while Roman stood silent in dominance. For years, Heyman was the trusted right hand of the tribal chief, his personal advisor, his public advocate, his human shield when the heat got too real. So when Paul Heyman stood over Roman's body and laughed, the betrayal hit harder than any chair shot. To understand why this moment was so devastating, you have to look at what Heyman meant to Roman's entire run. From the moment Roman returned in 2020 and declared himself the head of the table, Heyman was there, not as the mouthpiece of a monster, like he was for Brock Lesnar, but as the high priest of a movement. His role shifted. He wasn't just hyping matches, he was shaping mythology. Heyman legitimized Roman's reign in ways few could. His gravitas, his storytelling, his ability to speak in layers made every segment feel bigger. Every Roman promo, every match, every feud, Heyman framed it with gravitas. He turned bloodline into destiny. Championships into lineage. Victories into prophecy. And for years, he remained loyal. Even when Roman abused his power. Even when cracks began to show in the family. Even when Lesnar returned and old allegiances were questioned. Heyman stayed. He begged. He groveled. He played both sides when he had to, but in the end, he always found his way back to Roman. It was a dysfunctional loyalty, but it felt real. Emotional. Earned. That's what made his silence during the ambush so haunting. When Bron Breakker struck, Heyman didn't scream. He didn't reach for security. He didn't throw himself over Roman's body like he once had during Lesnar's attacks. He just watched. And when Seth Rollins entered the ring and delivered that final, surgical stomp, Heyman didn't cry out. He stepped forward. Paused. And laughed. A short, sharp exhale. Not a cackle. Not maniacal. But pure. Intentional. Inevitable. That single gesture recontextualized years of storytelling in one instant. Because that wasn't the laugh of shock. That wasn't the laugh of someone breaking down. It was the laugh of release. Of a man no longer burdened by loyalty. Of a man who watched a king fall and found it funny. And that opens a terrifying question: how long had Heyman been waiting for this? Was he involved in the plan? Had he aligned with Rollins and Breakker in secret? Or was this simply the moment he decided to switch allegiances? The most unsettling possibility isn't that Heyman helped orchestrate the attack. It's that he didn't need to. It's that he saw it coming, and he let it happen. That he'd grown tired of carrying Roman's empire on his back. Tired of holding up a leader who no longer listened, no longer ruled with clarity, no longer earned the respect Heyman believes is sacred. Roman Reigns, for all his dominance, had become insular. Distrustful. He questioned even Heyman in the final months of his run. He shouted down advice. He grew paranoid about the Usos, Solo, even Heyman himself. The walls were closing in. Maybe Heyman saw it. Maybe he decided it was better to let the house burn than go down with it. And maybe, just maybe, Paul Heyman laughed because, for the first time in years, he felt free. But freedom from what? From Roman's reign? Or from his own guilt? Remember, Heyman has a history of betrayal masked as loyalty. He turned on Brock Lesnar once. He played both sides during the Reigns-Lesnar feud. He's always been a survivor, not a martyr. A man who backs the strongest, not the most loyal. He's not driven by emotion, he's driven by leverage. So, when he saw Bron Breakker, young, brutal, unshaped potential, maybe he saw his next vessel. And in Seth Rollins, a man with history, cunning, and chaos in his DNA, maybe Heyman saw his next alliance. Or maybe, he saw something even more dangerous. A future without Roman Reigns. And decided to embrace it. Heyman's betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't declared. But it didn't need to be. A look. A smirk. A laugh. That's all it took. Because when Paul Heyman turns his back on you, it means you're no longer useful. No longer feared. No longer worth saving. And that might be the deepest cut Roman has ever felt. Because he didn't just lose a match. He didn't just get jumped. He lost the man who built the myth with him. He lost the only one who ever truly understood the burden of the throne. Now the wise man walks alone. Or worse, he walks with your enemies. The bell never rang. There was no official match. No referee counted to 3. But when Bron Breakker and Seth Rollins exited the ring, leaving Roman Reigns face down in a pool of humiliation, the arena didn't feel like it had just witnessed a wrestling angle. It felt like it had just survived a riot. There are moments in WWE history where the energy in the arena shifts from entertainment to something darker. Montreal. Hell in a Cell 1998. CM Punk in Chicago. This was one of those nights. And the strange part? No one knew what to do. For the first time in years, Roman Reigns, that Roman Reigns, was broken in public. Not beaten. Broken. There was no slow build. No high-stakes match. No storytelling crescendo. Just violence. Cold, brutal, unscripted-looking violence. And when it ended, there was silence. Not the stunned kind you get when a heel wins clean. Not the confused kind you get when a storyline swerve fails. This was real silence. The kind where thousands of people look at each other like they're waiting to be told what they just saw. You could hear it through the broadcast. The usual buzz that follows a big moment was absent. No dueling chants. No crowd pop. Just hushed conversations in the front rows and uneasy murmurs in the back. Some fans were filming. Others had their phones down. A few were visibly uncomfortable. Because when Roman Reigns, the invincible, the tribal chief, the man with 3 years of untouchability behind him, laid completely still in the ring, it stopped being just a wrestling moment. It became a spectacle of defeat. The referees swarmed in. Not quickly, but carefully. The way they move when they're unsure if the guy inside the ring is acting, or actually hurt. One checked Roman's eyes. Another waved for medical assistance. They weren't selling a story. They looked nervous. That kind of nervous WWE doesn't fake well. Roman didn't respond. His body twitched once. His fingers moved. But his face stayed buried in the mat, and that's when the camera pulled back. WWE rarely cuts wide unless they want to hide something, or sell just how bad the moment is. This time, it was both. Backstage crew came down. A medic. A producer. And still, no one helped him sit up. They didn't roll him over for dramatic effect. They didn't try to bring him to his feet to close the segment with a round of applause. They brought out the gurney. The arena gasped. You don't roll out the gurney for Roman Reigns unless something's gone very wrong, or you want people to believe it has. In either case, the damage was done. Fans began to boo. Not the usual, I hate this heel, kind of heat. This was genuine discomfort. Some fans chanted Roman's name. Others just stared. A few held their hands over their mouths. The kids in the audience, who'd watched Roman go from feared villain to strange anti-hero, looked confused. They'd never seen him this way. Not vulnerable. Not helpless. This was a man who'd walked into arenas like a god. Now he was being carried out like a casualty. Michael Cole's voice cracked on commentary. Corey Graves, usually the mouthpiece of chaos, had nothing snarky to say. Even the production truck didn't roll replays right away. They waited. Let the moment breathe. That's how you know WWE knew the weight of what they'd just done. Heyman was gone by then. Slipped out while the crowd was watching Roman fall apart. Rollins and Breakker had already vanished. Only Roman remained, surrounded by referees and medics, as they strapped him to the board. And that silence? It stayed. All the way up the ramp. No triumphant music. No interruption. Just a quiet procession of disbelief. When the cameras cut backstage, there were no interviews. No locker room reactions. No shouting matches between superstars. That kind of backstage chaos WWE usually pumps into the aftermath? Absent. Instead, they cut to commercial. And when Raw came back, it was a different show. The energy was gone. The crowd was flat. Even the matches that followed, the ones meant to pick things back up, felt like filler. Like background noise. Because everyone in the building was still stuck in that moment. Replaying it. Asking the same question, was that real? Was that the end? Did we just witness the fall of Roman Reigns? Backstage reports would trickle out later. Rumors of concussion protocols. Of possible time off. Of Roman not speaking to anyone after the segment. Of Triple H being serious about the direction the story was heading. But in that moment, right there in the arena, it didn't feel like a story. It felt like a collapse. A dethroning so violent it left the kingdom in silence. The moment Roman Reigns was carried out of the arena, the chaos didn't stop, it simply moved off camera. Backstage, things weren't business as usual. In WWE, even the most shocking moments are usually well-planned, tightly scripted, and executed with military precision. Every wrestler knows where to be, what their cue is, and how long they have to hit their mark. But the attack on Roman Reigns? It threw everything off balance, even behind the curtain. So the natural question was, who knew? Who signed off on it? Who stood by while the tribal chief got publicly dismantled? And, most chilling of all, who helped orchestrate it from the shadows? There are levels to WWE's backstage system. There's creative, there's production, there's talent. Then there's the inner circle, the few voices who truly shape what happens on television. Triple H is one of those voices. Paul Heyman, ironically, has long been another. But when something this brutal happens, everyone starts pointing fingers. The whispers began immediately. Some insiders claimed this was months in the making. That Breakker and Rollins had been quietly kept apart for a reason. That Bron's path to the main roster was delayed, not denied, so he could be positioned perfectly for this moment. That seeds had been planted with Rollins long before his feud with Drew McIntyre ever happened. But here's the twist, not everyone in the locker room was in the loop. Sources backstage said that many superstars didn't know the full extent of what was going to happen. Some thought it would be a traditional swerve segment, a tease, maybe a chair shot or a surprise stare down. No one expected what actually unfolded, a full-scale execution that ended with Roman Reigns being stretchered out and Paul Heyman laughing like a man reborn. Multiple talents were said to be visibly uncomfortable. Some reportedly watched the segment on a backstage monitor and walked away halfway through. One unnamed veteran was quoted as saying, "If this is the new direction, then we're not playing by the same rules anymore." What did that mean? It meant that the aura Roman had built for years, the protected character, the near invincibility, the sacredness of his title reign, was no longer off limits. His legacy had been exposed. And if Roman wasn't protected, then no one was. In the hours after the show, chaos reigned in the green rooms. Production staff was said to be scrambling to adjust the formatting of post-Raw segments. Backstage interview plans were scrapped. Pre-tapes were re-edited. The focus had shifted entirely. No one could talk about their matches or feuds. Everything was overshadowed by what just happened in the ring. The Bloodline members were notably silent. Jey Uso, no stranger to betrayal, didn't say a word. Not on Twitter. Not to press. He was spotted leaving the arena early. Jimmy? Same. Solo Sikoa, who had stood beside Roman even when his brothers abandoned him, offered nothing but a cryptic post the next morning, a black square. No caption. Just darkness. It said more than words could. What about Paul Heyman? His absence from the backstage area after the segment didn't go unnoticed. Normally, Heyman is a vocal presence behind the curtain. Offering feedback. Talking to talent. Quietly orchestrating things. But on this night, he vanished. Witnesses say he left the building immediately after the cameras cut. That silence only deepened the suspicion. Was he a co-author of this betrayal? Had he known all along what was about to go down? Or had he simply read the signs and made a decision in real time? Even the writing team was reportedly stunned. Some writers had assumed Roman's segment would end in a promo. A teaser. A SummerSlam announcement. One insider described the final rewrite as tight-lipped and top-level only, meaning only a select few decision-makers knew the true direction. And that brings us back to the man at the top, Triple H. The chief content officer has guided WWE through one of its most creatively respected eras. His influence is evident in the long-term storytelling, the rise of NXT stars, and the shift toward grounded, character-driven narratives. He's also known for trusting a small circle and keeping game-changing moments under tight wraps. So did Triple H greenlight the dethroning of Roman Reigns? All signs point to yes. And if so, then this wasn't just about storytelling. It was a strategic reset. A decision to end an era that had, for all its success, run its course. Roman's dominance had created a vacuum in the roster. Too many stories revolved around him. Too many endings led back to the same place. Now, that place is gone. Backstage, the shift was immediate. Superstars began to recalculate their positions. Title chases, faction dynamics, promo plans, everything had to be reevaluated. For years, the question had been, how do I get to Roman? Now it became, who fills the void? And that vacuum is dangerous. Because it creates opportunity, but it also creates panic. When the top guy falls, it means the old rules don't apply. Alliances change. Strategies evolve. And the ones who were silent before? They start to speak. The backstage fallout wasn't just about shock. It was about fear. Fear that the game had changed overnight. And no one, not even the ones at the top, was safe anymore.